Hi. Can you hear me? Tell me if the volume is okay. Just give me a high sign if you can hear me okay. Okay, we're waiting for a couple more people to join. We have about half a dozen already. Let's give a few seconds, a minute. Hello, Rona. Allison. Okay, let's start. We are on a journey from Pesach to Shavous. And we probably forgot about Pesach already because it's been behind us. But let's capture the main inyan of Pesach, Yetzias Mitzrayim, going out of limitations. And that going out of limitations, as is said in the mimer that we learned in the parts of the mimer we learned previously, is called katnus, smallness. Our awareness of God, although it was a great revelation, wasn't internalized, as symbolized by the matzah, which is low, small. We had to be low, small, bittul, in order to receive it. And the revelation was a small revelation compared to the revelation that will be, Emir Hashem, when we finish counting the Omer on Shavous. So, in the mimer that we've covered so far, we've been talking about one of two major movements of the soul, so to speak. The first one being to push away those things which block the revelation of the godly soul, and the second being the harnessing and the transformation of the animal soul. And it's the latter which is particularly the focus of Sefiros Omer, counting the Omer. But before we get to that, we have a little bit of distance to travel to finish up the first half of the mimer, which is doing certain practices to push away the obstructions which hide the essential godliness which is within us. So we're holding on page 70. You have the text, if you don't have it in front of you. This is Likutei Torah Parshas Emor. The mimer was Usfartam Lechem, begins, you should count for yourselves. And it's on page 70. And as I said, it's copied in the WhatsApp for Chassidus at K if you don't have it. So let's start the traveling. Starting the second paragraph on page 70, and before I start, just if you get lost, let me know, give me a high sign. If you lose the place, if you lose the thought, if you have a comment, please float it up. Hi, Jonathan, Arnon, good to see you. Okay, page 70. Finishing up that piece of the mimer which deals with removing the obstructions of our normal, call it, quote, normal way of looking at things in order to reveal the godly essence which is within. And this is the prelude to the second half of the mimer, which is dealing with the transformation of the animal soul. So this is revealing the godly soul. And this is what our sages have said. Tefilos avos tiknum. The davening, tefilos, the fathers were mesakin them. They fixed them. They didn't fix the nusach, the order of the tefillah, but the whole idea of praying was innovated, if that's the right word, by the fathers. Avram innovated Shachris, Yitzchak Mincha, Yaakov Ma'ariv. Even though, as I said, the nusach is later, and the halachas are later. For instance, Ma'ariv is not a chiyuv the way Shachris and Mincha are. Now, what's it mean? We're going to jump to the Hasidic way of understanding the fathers. Pirish avois. The avois are the father attributes that we have, the driving attributes of each of our souls. which are constructed in a manner of 10 powers. And of those 10 powers, Chabad is the top 3, Chochmah, Bina, Das. And there are 7 other lower powers, which we call the Midos. And that is why, by the way, which you probably know, but if not, we'll say it, that there are 49 days of counting the Omer, because, as I said, the counting the Omer is primarily working on the animal soul, which is primarily Midos. The godly soul is more a revelation of intellect and above intellect. The Midos are more associated with an animal. An animal is more directed by his nature, which is a midah, than he is by intellectualization. So the father midos are Chesed, Gvura, and Teferes. Chesed on the right, Gvura on the left, Teferes in the middle. As we know, we're all counting the Omer. We're in the middle of Teferes. Tonight will be Yesoid, Sheva Teferes, and a little later we'll talk about these midos. So, the father midas Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Shenimshach mehem Aviv Yira, and Rachmanis. From these father midas, Chesed, Gvura, and Teferes, come out certain emotions in the person, and the emotions are Chesed, corresponds, which is kindness, which is love. The love is the what comes out from the midah of Chesed. Yira, fear or awe, comes out from the midah of Gevura, and compassion comes out from the midah, and sympathy and empathy come out from the midah of Teferes. So Chesed, Gevura, Teferes. Chesed, Ava, Gevura, Yira, or fear or love, and Teferes is Rahmat, compassion. And they are each one, so they call the avos, the father attributes, which we all have. And we all have them. Why? Because we all have a spiritual inheritance in what I call, colloquially, our spiritual DNA. That is the essence of how our souls are constituted, is an inheritance to us. Something has been given to us as an inheritance from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Rachel and Leah. And if you look at the davening, it's all one of 3 or different kinds of pesukim, different kinds of declarations. And the pesukim shel chesed, we have those utterances which have to do with chesed. Shenashe behem krishma, and the center of gravity of that is in Shema, where we say v'ahavta. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, which is the midah that love derives from chesed. And al idei his boininus kanal, and this is the point that the reason I call this a personal journey, because each one of us has the equipment within us, but each one of us in our own ways and according to our own unique formation of bringing these attributes forth and manifesting them in the way we live. So a person has to do contemplation, meditation. And through the hisbaininess, the meditation that we spoke about, Shehu Bechinas Avraham, which we spoke about a little bit about Avram himself. Avram is called Oyivi. God calls Avram my beloved, or the one who loves me. And that's the meditation of Avraham, is the meditation of revealing the essential love that a person has for God in a manner that creates a yearning, a ratzah. Ratzah really means to run, a yearning. And then it says further in the paragraphs of Shema that through these things, first comes the contemplation, the meditative, then comes the speech, articulating it, particularly in prayer and learning, and then, of course, turning it into action. So that's the process. It's a meditative process that begins with contemplating. If it's talking about as we are love, it's talking about contemplating the essential love of God, the essential connection with love that we have as a spiritual inheritance from Avram in particular. And then we have Parsha Shniya. We have the second Parsha of Krishna, Kesiv Yasavta Diganecha. And it says, okay, we're learning, right? V'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam. Learn them and speak of it. And then the second parsha goes on and says, v'yachavta diganecha, which means you have to go to work. You have to go out in the field. You're not meant, so maisa, right? Maisa hu ha'ikar. The main thing is what we do with our contemplation and our arousal of our heart and the words that come up with our mouth. They can't be empty words. They have to be brought into v'safta diganecha, go and gather your corn. So he calls it nachar teiros and kavah, even though that's true, maisa hu ha'ikar. But the Chachamim, as we know from Mishnah, they argued from the Talmud, argued which is greater, maisa, doing, or learning. And they concluded, gadol Torah. Great is Torah. Torah is great. But why is it great? Shemevi l'dei maisa, because it brings to deed. So in order for the deed, let's go in reverse, from the deed to be harmonized with the emotion of feeling a connection with God, and that comes through harmonization in the mind. So the harmonization in the mind begins by learning Torah, as we are here right now. And that's why the Chachamim said, Nasha Teros and Kovah, make your Torah fixed, Umalachte Arai, and your work, Arai, not so fixed. Someone could give me a better word for that, Arai. And what it means is that it doesn't mean, of course, we can't say it means make most of your day learning Torah. No, we're not Bachrim in Yeshiva here. We're make it fixed in your heart. That's the firm thing in your heart. That's the foundation. Kava, it's fixed in your heart. That's nailed to your heart. And what you do in your work is an embodiment of that, and as a result of that, and therefore it's arai. And this is what the Torah says. The Torah, in talking about the portion of the Torah which talks about when you conquer a land, you should leave the trees. And it says, Ka'adam Eitz Soda, is a man a tree of the field? So that question is turned in Chassidus right here into a statement. It's just, we take the words, Adam Eitz Soda, there is, Adam and Eitz Soda are equated over here. So, Otzim Shehu Kamai Ilan. So let's take a look at a person in the metaphor of a tree. Right, fixed, fixed versus ephemeral. Thank you very much, Sarah. That your Torah should be kavah, your Torah should be fixed. That's the anchor in life. And the ephemeral, or that which you do as a result of that, is the malacha, is the work that you do. Okay, so he's using this now and explaining this. Excuse me. He's explaining this in the mashal of a tree, because the Torah gives us an opportunity. He says, Adam Eitz Soda. So just like in a tree, Hatzameach ba'aretz, which is planted in the ground, she'ikir hu hapri. The main thing, of course, is the fruit. The main thing is the fruit. She'olav, which is on the tree. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, yesh gam kaitzim va'olim. In order to get to the fruit, you have to go, particularly to some particular species have thorns and difficulty. It's a difficult thing to get to the fruit. The gufa ilim, you have to get to the body of the tree, the trunk of the tree, and get up the tree and pick through the kaitzim, the thorns. The ikirhu raka peres, but after all the picking through all that, why are you doing it? Because the main thing is the fruits. And what are the fruits? The fruits are the mitzvahs, the deeds that we do, what we do on the ground. To make it Adam, so similarly, it's because we're comparing a man to a tree, a human being to a tree. So similarly, a person, the main thing is the fruits, mitzvahs. That's the Torah and the mitzvahs that he does. As our sages have said, my pri mitzvahs. What is fruit? It's a Gemara in Sota. Gemara says, what is the fruit? What are the fruits of a person's life? The mitzvahs. And that's what it means the Torah should be fixed. Now we understand. Torah fixed, this is your life. The sharkal socket gufa, and the other things that you have to do with your life, and they're like the leaves. The leaves are necessary, right? The whole tree functions as an organic whole, and there's not going to be any fruit without all the organism. But the fruit is the main thing. And the other things are like the leaves, the gabi peri, in relation to the fruit. Okay, and all of this comes from the level of Ava. This was all kind of something to think about, a metaphor to think about, to encourage and evoke the love that's implanted in the godly soul. By thinking all of the substance that I have to get through to climb the tree, all the everyday affairs of everyday life have to be cleared out in some way in my mind so that I can see through them, use them, not cast them away, use them. They're important. They're part of the process, and without that process there is no discovery of the fruit or no materialization of the fruit. And the fruit, and therefore by climbing the tree, I come closer to the fruit, and that expresses the coming closer, the yearning of a person, v'ahavta, in his love of God. And that's the beginnings of Avraham, love. Again, moving away the secondary, ephemeral aspects of life, the trunk of the tree, the kaitzim, the thorns of the tree, and discovering the fruit. Now that's the chesed of chesed, right? Chesed, gevurah, teferes. 3 top minos. Now the person also, that's one side of the avodah that a person has to do. The left side is gevurah. Shenasa b'chiras yira. And that evokes the totally opposite experience of love, which is fear or reverence or awe. And that's associated with Yitzhak. It's a pasuk. The pasuk calls the God of Yitzhak Pachad Yitzhak, the fear of Yitzhak. And then you have, very short, and now we'll go short to Bechinas Yaakov. Right? Yaakov is Bechinas Rachmanos. He's the characteristic of compassion, because he's the middle kav. Chesed on the right, Gevurah on the left, and Yaakov in the middle. He's the integrator, the one that integrates the right. I mean, we've talked about this many times before. This emotional is given. A child wants something sweet, you give him candy. That's a chesed, but it's only a chesed up to a point. You have to hold back because that's the Gevurah. Because if you continue giving candy, you're going to have a big dental bill, and he's not going to be very comfortable. So the chesed has to be tempered, with Gevurah, and the tempering, integrating facet of one's personality and of one's soul is Yaakov. Hu b'chinas rachmanis. Dahainu misha libi kaleva evan. So we're talking if a person has a heart of stone, she'afshem is boinim b'kol hanal, even if he or she meditates, contemplates in everything we said above, lo yovel b'chinas v'ahavta shebekrishna, and the person still doesn't come to feel the love, even when the person is articulating v'ahavta es Hashem elokech, that you love your God. And the only reason why, is because the person is tangled up in the vanities of the world. Preoccupied with his yeshusness, his or her substantiality, as opposed to his or her godliness. And therefore, for that reason, one's heart could be a heart of stone. So what do? The advice for this is, here's where Yaakov comes into the process. Arouse rachamim rabim al nafshay. Say to God, have mercy on me. I know the truth. I learned it Tuesday night at 8:30 in a class, and other classes that you have. I learned it, right? And I got it in my head. But there's a disconnect between my head and my heart. My heart's in the marketplace. My head is in the Torah. God, have pity on me. Have pity on me. Have compassion on me. Rain down on me the attribute of Yaakov, that I can bring these things together. Because of the Yaakov is written to Yaakov, Asher poda es Avraham. It's a pasuk. Yaakov redeemed Avraham. It means, in our context of this mimer, Avram, the love of God, is hidden and captured in our preoccupation with everyday life, and Yaakov, the compassion, the yearning and asking God for mercy, is what redeems it, allows it to get out of the exile and be redeemed. And these, and we said this earlier, all of these midos have pesukim in the davening that we use. So al yidei pesukim rachmanis shebetefillah, and we say, for instance, Hu hamelech hamareimon, he's an exalted king, and we say, V'rachamecha harabim merachim oleinu, you who are exalted king, please have mercy upon us. Avinu avarachamim merachim oleinu, our Father of mercy, have mercy upon us. V'sein bilibenu bina, and please give us bina, understanding. Not just knowledge in the sense of knowing something superficially, but give us bina, good understanding. The Zohar says, bina liba, that bina is the beginning of penetration to the heart. Bina liba, bina is the heart, u'bo halev mevin, and the heart comes to understand. So we pray for that. Give us, we pray, lahaskil v'lei nevosh, that I should be understanding and I shouldn't be ashamed. Pirish, meaning, Hihina Kasiv is written, Le Yereni ha'adam v'chai. It says, no person will will see me and live. God says about himself. No one will see me and live. And the Chazal say on this, a very powerful word, which we're going to understand. You don't see God? Right. When one's life, one doesn't see God, literally. But in one's death, one sees God. Because in the life that we live, to the extent that it's a life of the flesh and the life of the yesh, the life that's in front of our faces, that the arai, the leaves and the thorns, the stuff that's a prerequisite necessary to be involved with, but that becomes our preoccupation. So to that extent, when the soul is enclosed in the body, which it covers over and conceals, lies nirale zeha oilam, that because this world appears to be a yesh, a thing, v'davar bifnei atzma, and a thing on its own. Avon, that's what we have to overcome in this life. To, as I said, this section is all about pushing away the obfuscation and the blockages and the concealments of the animal soul to see beneath it. But aval b'tzeis nefesh me'aguf, when the soul is actually released from this, not just in a meditative, contemplative way that we do as we're neshamas in bodies, but when the soul is actually released from the body, then we see then we see that God's essence and what He essentially is, which is hoya haibavayir, the word havaya in all three tenses of being, past, present, future, bli shum shinoi, without any change, ve'en shum davar yochel lahalbishoi, and when the soul is out of the body, nothing is enclothing it at all, lahastiroi, and causing it, the reality of God, to be hidden. So when a person is there, the shama out of body, so then one realizes that it's been a complete mistake. And that the complete mistake that the world is at something and something on its own. So why is he bringing this up? He's not bringing this up to pine for olam haba in the sense of going up to heaven. He's giving us the viewpoint from heaven, so that we'll say now, well, if that's the reality, why am I not trying to cultivate it now? The Torah has been given to me. It's Torah meloshen hara, the Rabbi always says. The Torah is a word which means teaching. But it's not a teaching which allows you to come away and write a term paper. It's a teaching which allows you to come away and live with the experience of what the true reality is, and do it now, because that's what God commands. Hayom la'asaisam. Today is the day to do it, and not in the world to come. But we got a viewpoint from the world to come, but now is the time to take advantage of it. So if a person will do this and realize that the perspective of the yesh, the separateness that exists in the world, is really a very thin layer of covering over the vast, deep reality of God Himself. So a person will be ashamed of himself. Ad l'moed, very much. Al shekol machshavos sobu magmusa, which that all of his thoughts and all of his energies were in the vanities of the world. And in his business, or whatever he's been preoccupied with. And he lived as though this is the stuff, and whatever I know about, I heard about God, right? I haven't learned about God. I went to yeshiva, right? I went to seminary. But the main thing is the stuff in front of my face. Okay, but that you should realize now, not wait for then. Now is a big mistake. Okay, thinking that the world is something on its own mamish. He calls it, it's a big arrogance to think that this stuff and all the $14.9 billion that Eric Schmidt, he comes to mind. Eric Schmidt is the CEO of Alphabet, which is the father company for Google, and a few others. I just happened to see recently. $14.9 billion net worth. And if a person goes around, now I'm not saying a person that wealthy can't be humble. There's nothing wrong with riches because many good things can be done with them. But to take pride in that, and that being your pride, is a arrogance. Therefore, because you'll say no, we beseech God, with in your great mercy, rachem aleinu, have mercy upon us, and give us understanding in our hearts, to understand something within something else. What's it mean? Bina, that's what Bina is. Chokhmah is a flash of insight. Bina is understanding how to apply that, how to design, how to implement, etc. So when you see something, you understand what it is, its structure, internal structure, which is the idea of standing something within something else. But here we're using it more metaphorically to understand the real something, which is in the something else, which is externality, materiality, physicality, etc., etc. Jonathan says the data is slow, may have to listen to video. Are other people experiencing a problem with either the voice or the pickup? Well, maybe it means that it needs a little repetition on your own time. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm taking it, since I don't see other comments, that everything is cool here. Okay. Choppy. That I can't really affect. It's I was on a Zoom, and the Zoom is choppy. It depends. That's all about the internet, and how much the internet is carrying. Maybe if I slow down a little, we'll see. I'll try to slow down the speech a little bit. Okay. So Bina, to understand something within something, to understand, okay, it's fine over there. Okay, so some places are different. So, okay. So to understand the underlying realities which are being masked by the superficial realities. So we pray to God that we say, give into our hearts and understanding this. So I said, so we're not. I gave you, he says, a perspective of what it's really like, and that's the perspective that the neshama is going to have when released from the body. But the thing is, now, even now, while your neshama still is in the body, Yavin, a person should understand, beyaskil, and be mindful. Sheba emes, in truth, hakol batal betachlis. Everything is utterly nullified, completely. In other words, what we see is not what we get. What we get should be what we don't see. So everything is not the betachlis. Really, the whole creation is just a emanation from God. Blishum shuni mamish, but God Himself has not changed at all. He is He who was before the world was creation. Adonai Elohim Hashem Alach b'terem kol yitzur nivra. Right? You are He who ruled before b'terem kol yitzur nivra, before there was anything formed. which itself needs a little understanding, but that's it. He's there, always, eternal, without change. And let me feel that in my heart. Mavin, bina liba, rachem oleinu. Give us the same bilubenu, and give us in our heart, so that we won't be at all ashamed when we come upstairs. I mean, he's saying when we come upstairs, but it's even a shameful thing now, because we know too much. We know what's really possible. What's really possible is to experience Elokus in our daily lives in the most mundane things we do. We don't want to be ashamed when our souls go up. And this was all about Yaakov. It's interesting, he had a short piece on Avram, and just a few words about Yitzchak, Gevurah, and a beautiful whole piece on Yaakov. One thing I might say just comes to mind, excuse me, shortly, brought from other places, two meanings of Yaakov. Yud, Ekev. If you break the word apart, Yud is God's name. Ekev is the heel, the lowest part of the body. So Yaakov is what brings down godliness into the lower world. And that fits with what we're saying, the Midah of Rachmanis, the integrator. It brings understanding into feeling, heart, and action. And another one, short, Yaakov is breakthrough. Bokeya. If you change the letters around and start with the base, Bokeya is breakthrough. And this really is breakthrough. It's a breakthrough way of living, to live fully in the world, but not be of the world. Be fully in the world and bring godliness to every aspect of it. Godliness sounds something abstract. It really isn't. It's what Hashem says, 613 things, ways, and all their branches are the ways that you bring God down to earth. Okay, now the Alter Rebbe goes on in Ois Gimel, and he tells us, in Kol Hanal Shehu B'chinas Ratzai, everything which we just spoke about, and what we spoke about in previous weeks, is Yetzias Mitzrayim, is going out of limitations. As I said earlier, this first part has been about moving away the obstructions, the hestorim, the coverings of superficial reality, moving that away and allowing the emergence and discovery and emergence and at least psychological visibility to the godly which is within us. So that's called going out of Egypt, going out of limitations. And he says, so far we've only been talking about the godly soul, revealing the godly soul, Bilvad. Which the godly soul, another way of summing up everything we said, is in a state of exile in the limitations, Gevulim, and the boxes and boundaries, Hamachasim, which cover over. Like Parah said, Parah in Egypt, he knew God and he knew Elohim, God, gods and gods, but he didn't know the Shem Havaya. Mishakosov is written, Anoichi ered imoch Mitzrayma. God says, I to Abraham, I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, maybe to Yaakov, not sure. If you know, just flash it up here. Ashekodesis Abraham Moshe Yitzchak. Okay, that's interesting. Amidul Yaakov. Okay, another pasuk Sarah brought up about where we see these three avos, these three fathers. This covenant which was made for Avram, and the oath that was made for Yitzchak, and which stood to Yaakov, etc., as an eternal covenant for all of Yisrael. Another way in which the Torah expresses the triad that is the foundation of our belief. Thank you. And if anyone knows, God said I'm thinking maybe it's Yaakov. He said, I will be with you when you go to Egypt. I said, I will be with you when I go to Egypt, and I will take you out of Egypt. I will bring you out. Thank you very much. Yaakov, he tells us. This is what was said to Yaakov, Shehu hanefesh elokis bilvad, which this is a talk that God gave to the godly soul. Yud Ekif, a third way that he brings, the Alter Rebbe brings of understanding Yaakov. Yud Ekif. It said Yaakov Hevel Nachalatzka. Yud Ekif. Yaakov is a rope is inheritance. We'll see. A rope is like the old kinds of rope of hemp that are woven together by three small strands are woven together into a rope of hemp. If you guys ever did any sailing, you know about these ship ropes on ships. Ki Yaakov Chevel Nachalatzka Ki Chelek Hashem Amo. It says because God is a part of him. Okay, it says, okay, because it's written, Yad Yisrael is a Yad HaGadolah. Yisrael is the Jewish people, but of course, Yisrael is also the name of Yaakov after he wrestles with the angel. But the Yisrael, the Jewish people, they saw the hand of God, Asher Asher Hashem, which God did for the Jewish people in Egypt. Asher also Hashem She Yisrael Bilvad. It was only the Jewish people, Shehu HaNefesh Elokis, Yisrael, Yaakov, the Jewish soul, which experienced this. Yisrael Olaba Machshava. It says Yisrael, the Jewish people, the Nefesh Elokis. Remember, we're saying in the above, Yaakov is the Nefesh Elokis, as we said in the bottom of the page. Yaakov hu ha-Nefesh Elokis. It's the Nefesh Elokis which was given all of this vision, and which is the entity which is a part of God. Achelak Elokam Imal, Chelak Havaya Amo, his people. At root are the Chelak of God himself. And as we say in Krishna, B'chinas Urotzoi is going out of Egypt. V'ahavta, that's loving. And all of this, Eine Ela L'Nefesh Elokis Bilvad, was only for the godly soul. And now we turn for the rest of the Maimer to the animal soul. A little introduction. Sefiros Omer, we talked about before. What is Sefiros Omer? Why? What's the counting? First of all, we learned in the beginning of the Maimer, Sfira has a few meanings. Sfira is related to the English word cipher, which means to count, and that's what we do. Count the Omer, right? But Sfira is also related to the word Even Saphir, a shining stone. In English, a sapphire stone. And so, Sefiros HaOmer is through counting certain things, which we'll talk about, and it's counting each of the 7 times 7 mitos that we have. We come to shine, we come to bring to the animal soul a rectified state of being where the animal, not only the godly soul, once you reveal the godly soul wants to serve God. The animal soul is the part of the soul that's in a way stubborn, right, like an animal, but the animal has a couple of other interesting characteristics which we'll get to, which this is a behemoth. This is the food that we're giving is the Omer, which is the barley, which is the first harvest after Pesach, as opposed to the wheat, which is harvested at Shavous time. And the Se'ura, as we're going to learn as we go down this page, is particularly the food of an animal. And the animal has a couple of interesting and almost paradoxical but unified, but they come together, ways of behaving. The behemoth, think of the behemoth as the bovine animals. We're not talking here about a lion and a tiger. We're feeding grain to a cow, an ox. Well, we have an ox that gores. We have a bull that fights. So there's a tremendous power in the animal soul, tremendous resource of energy. And in addition to that, the bovine animals that we feed, and we heard them, herding that we can herd these cows is itself a representation of their bittul. That they become their bittul, they have a master, and they don't fight the master. So it's a very interesting composite, which we'll explore as we get. What does it mean then to feed and ultimately rectify the animal soul? Means to capture a level of power that you didn't have. It says that in Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe and also the Mittler Rebbe, having to do with the vision of the Markava, the chariot that Yechezkel saw. That there's a chariot, and we're going to see the chariot soon. The chariot is being pulled by an ox, a lion, and an eagle. And the ox is on the right, which is the side of Chesed. And the chariot, what does it do? The chariot brings a man to a place where a man couldn't come without it. The man, Adam, is the godly soul. The animal is the animal soul. And the animal, the cow, the horse, this is actually, and I remind me, so these are in the Memorim, the Alter Rebbe in the middle of Rabbi on Purim, when Sefiros says to Haman, what should I do if I want to honor somebody? He says, you should give him the cloak of the king and the horse of the king. And in the exposition, in the Hasidic exposition, the horse brings a man to a place that he could not get to on his own. The horse brings the animal soul, brings the godly soul to a place which it couldn't bring on its own. That's where we're going. I know not how this is actually going to work is what we're going to talk about. But at least get to the concepts. We're talking about making the animal in us shine, Sefiros, Lashon Safir, by feeding it sa'ira, which is barley, and the food of an animal, so that the animal can take the godly soul to places that the godly soul couldn't reach without it. So now we'll start. We'll do as much as we can tonight, and of course we've got a few more weeks to finish this. I'm not rushing through here. There's a lot of density in this mimer. Okay, so we're 5 lines down in the second column on page 70, in the middle of the line. Excuse me. Aval hanefesh bahamis, the animal soul. Mikol mokem, it wants its first instinct, so to speak. It wants to eat. Kamaisa behem. That's the starting point of the animal soul. The animal soul is what gives us this lowered consciousness in the first place. Remember, if we get all that stuff out of the way, the godly consciousness would be in front of our eyes. But we're an animal, and an animal, we're partly animal, and that part of what is an animal does animal things. It needs to be focused on food. It needs to be focused on health, getting rest, etc., etc., procreating. These are the things that an animal does. So, and to do it needs to eat. Now, in order for us to receive the Torah, shehu gili ratzono yisborach, which is the revelation of God's will, kaviochel lamata, down here below, if you can say such a thing. Well, you can say such a thing. God reveals himself in the Torah, in the very first word of the Ten Commandments, Anoichi. God, we know that Anoichi stands for Ani, I, Nafshi, myself, wrote it and gave it over. But of course, God can't give himself over because he's much bigger than all of it. He is all of it. But we say, if you can say such a thing, he narrows his existence, so to speak, and encapsulates it in this Torah, so that we are gifted with a touch of the Ein Sof, the infinite, in the world of limitation that we are. So he gives over himself. There's a revelation of God's will in the Torah down here below. But in order for that to happen, Hutzuk Lias Mekoidim, there has to be beforehand Bechinas Bittul Nefesh Bahamas. We have to nullify, make flattened, effaced, open up, find the docility of the animal, the cow, the herd, and the power of it, and harness it. So we need that bittul of the nefesh bahamas. So in other words, we need to know it isn't enough. There's a reason why God put the godly soul and the animal soul together, which at first glance they look like antagonists, but they're really meant to be a cooperative pair. And in a certain sense, the animal is going to be the lever that lifts us up, just like the horse lifts up a person or the chariot carries the person. So the process of nullifying, making docile, and lifting up and elevating, and ultimately converting the animal's soul is the process of the Kohen Gadol waving the Omer. He waves the Omer up. As the Pasuk says, is the Pasuk of waving the Omer and Sefiros Omer and the counting of the Omer. So we have the Pasuk in Parshas Emor, which is where this Parsha is from. The Heini Vesa Omer Lifnei Hashem, that the Kohen lifts the Omer in front of Hashem. We'll understand later what it means in front of Hashem. But it's Seinechem, that they should arouse, in order to arouse Hashem's will. And when does this happen? Mimachas Shabbos, which the Pasuk says Mimachas Shabbos, but it's really the second day of Pesach. That's also going to be a topic that we'll get to. But it says, this is the Pasuk, that he raises Haini Fa'aymer Lifnei Havaya, lift up and wave the offering before Havaya, with Tzedechem to arouse your will. Mimachas Shabbos, from the second day of Shabbos, Yafenu HaKoyin, the Koyin waves it. So we're going to take this apart and understand what does that mean to each of us in terms of our personal avoida of getting from Pesach to Shavous. Just looking to see what's out there. Okay. First thing we mention it, and they say the Omer is from barley. Shehu Michael Behema, which is food for the animal. So we have to feed this animal. So Kamaikein Lamaila, similarly upstairs, meaning in the realms of godliness, Yesh Gam Kein Bechinas Behema. There's also an animal, V'hu HaMarkava Elyoina, and this animal is on the supernal chariot. So this image of a chariot is envisioned in the prophets in many different levels. Yeshayahu had a vision of the prophets of it. Yechezkel had a vision of it. One was in Bria, in the lower worlds. One was in Yetzirah, the lower world. One was in Bria, and there's a very high level that's in the realms closest to God Himself. This whole idea, because it's a car, it takes you somewhere, and it takes you, in our case, not a distance horizontal, but a distance vertically, closer and closer and closer to the animal is lifting us closer and closer. If we do right with this animal, he will be a vehicle for lifting us up to the Makava El Yaina. And this animal has Pnei Aria El Yamin. This is Yechezkel's vision. An animal, a lion on the right. I said it wrong in the first place. It's the lion on the right. Upnei Shorma Hasmor, the ox. That's the power on the left. Ki Chaya Bichlal Behema. And he said, in general, the word behema can specifically mean the bovines, but in general, when Yechezkel saw the animals, he called them all animals, behema. Al Hayam she'asa shlema, and we have this word Shlomo HaMelech when he drew the blueprints and gave the blueprints over and started construction for the Beis Hamikdash. He also gave blueprints over to a structure, a sculpture, excuse me, that would be near his palace, and this palace was it had Shnaim Osa Boka, it had 12 cows which held up, and four, and they were in four groups, groups of three, each in the four directions. Pointing to Foina, one group of three pointed to the north, east, south, and west, and that was emblematic. And probably for Shlomo HaMelech, it was more than emblematic. It was probably a reality of the Markava down here below in the real world. It was a model of the Markava Elyonim. And above it was a big dish of water, which was a sea, Milamayla. So again, it's the notion that the bovine animals are bearing a burden down here below, and they're carrying it up and up. And what they're bearing a burden of is the hidden worlds, the Yam, the Suf, the Yam Suf, the ocean, which is the ocean of hiddenness that's infinitely progresses or regresses or elevates through level after level to the Ein Sof himself. So, and he says, so you have the markava down here below, the cows. This was this little piece, it wasn't so little. I don't remember the definition, but it was a nice sized piece of statuary. And it was a model, and a physical model which reflected a spiritual model of animals, behemoths, lifting up higher and higher. As he says, Shehu Bechinis Yama Elyon, to the supernal sea. So this is Behema Rabbah, this is called the great animal, which is also called the Shem Ban. Now a couple of things. And here you'll have to bear with me. This is little visuals here. You have to bear with me because I have to move my piece here in order. Here it is. Okay. I'm going to show you something here. Okay. Looks clear to me. You see it pretty clear. I know I'm a little shaky, so it's not so... Okay, so here, the diagram shows a kohen down at the bottom. Yafinu ha-kohen. The kohen is lifting up the Omer, and the Omer is the food of the barley, which is reminiscent of the chariot. You see the chariot with the lion on the right and the cow on the left, right? And that goes up to what we just talked about, the Behema Rabbah. There's the Behema Rabbah. I mean, if I point, I guess I can point with my finger if I get this right. Why can't I find my finger? I think you see it's the second circle that right above in the middle, the Behema Rabbah. And then we're going to go up even to the higher level. So we had the physical chariot down here below. We have a spiritual chariot, the chariot that Yechezkel saw and Yeshayahu saw. And then you have the highest level of chariot, which is reaching up to the very breaches, the very close proximity to the Ein Sof itself. So we'll just leave that for the moment. Okay, I hope all you saw it. If you didn't or would like, I can snap it and put it in the Chassidus at K WhatsApp also, so you get a better view. I'll probably show it again, I think, depending on what words come up next here. Okay. So, yeah. This is the chariot, the supernal chariot, right? And this was so we had the chariot of Shlomo, we had the chariot in the supernal worlds, and then the chariot that gets closest to the Ein Sof itself. Now, this behema, this word behema, Beis, He, Mem, He. This is the Shem Ban. Now this I have to show you something else here. Show you something else. There probably is a better way to do this, but I'm not so professional. I'm going to reverse this again. Okay. Now this chart says, tell me, by the way, if I should be moving it closer or farther away so that it's clear. It's clear to me. So this chart says Miluyim of the Shem Havaya. A Milui. You take a Yud Ke Vav Ke, that's the name Havaya, right? You can fill it. Milui means to fill it in various ways with other letters. The one we're going to look at is is number 3, Shem Ban. So you take the Yud, the letter Yud, and you spell it out, Yud Vav Daled, which gives you 20, right? 10, 6, and 4, 20. Yud is 10, Vav is 6, and 4 is 20. And you spell out the He with 2 He's, He, He. And you spell out the Vav, 2 Vavs, and again 2 He's, and you add them up, and you get 52. That's called Shem Ban, the name of God, which indicates Behema, which indicates an animal. Okay. So what? Right, who cares? Let's find out. Who cares? Why we care about that? Okay? Well, let me just say something about the Miluyim in general. This is a general concept in Kabbalah, and explained in Chassidus. When you take the Yud Kei Vav Kei and look at it, what it presents is letter Yud, Hey, Vav, Kei. But the Miluyim are what's hidden in it. What's hidden in it are various powers. The power of, we just did the power of spelling it out, so there's 52. This is the animal power in the Yud Kei Vav Kei. There are others. It's spelled out in the manner that each equals 63. I have them on the page, but I don't want to get too digressed into Miluyim. The Yud Kei Vav Kei can be spelled in another way, which adds up to 63, which is Sag. And Sag, if you reverse the letters, are Gas, which is arrogance. But we spoke about this when we learned about Purim. There's the arrogance of Kedusha. In other words, being totally, locked in and unmoving in your adherence to the law of Israel, to the law of God. So the Yud Kei Vav Kei has hidden in it, and generally on its own it's the attribute of compassion, of Rahmanis, but it has hidden in it other powers, and we're focusing now on the animal power. Okay, so that's the chariots, and that's the Miluyim. So, and that's Behema. We're hopefully focusing on Behema. Behema, and the line begins Shem Ban, if you lost the place. Shem Ban. Gematria Behema, which is numerical value of the word Behema. Shehu Sharash Hamakava de Pnei Aria, and which is the source of that chariot, which has the face of the lion, the face of the ox. In other words, the whole of creation is a manifestation of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud, God's Chachma, his point, like the point of origin. The Hey, expansiveness. He lays out the firmament and the heavens, expansiveness, that's the Hey. Vav, he brings down from those abstract to us levels of godliness, down and down and down, until he gets the platform, spreads out again, which is the platform of earth down here below, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So it's a pictogram for the creation, Yud Kei Vav Kei. But as in every world, even a small world like our own, even in a household, there are a lot of different energies going down. So the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei also embodies other energies that it brings down, and one of these energies is the energy of the Behema, which is our focus. Feeding the Behema, cultivating the Behema, utilizing and harnessing the power of the animal to lift ourselves up. Okay. This is coming fairly densely, I know, and there's just a few lines here. There's extremely dense pieces. We've got Behema. We hopefully now understand why we're focused on Behema, why this whole period is focused on the Omer, the barley, which is the food for the animal, because the whole period is focused on rectifying the 49 combinations of the 7 midos, each one in ourselves. And we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so we have the Behema, we know what the barley's about, we know what the animal's about, and we know about Shem Ban, there's the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which Gematria is Behema. And the Markava, the chariot, the line begins Hanal, who Shoresh and Mokah L'Kol HaBehemas. You should know this chariot, which is drawn by these animals, these spiritual configurations, which we call animals, is the root source of all the animals down here below, the physical animals, and it's also the source of the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, which is in each one of us, down at Shalamata. Shenimshechim Mimenu, they're all drawn from this so-called configuration of chariot drawn by animals up above in the spiritual worlds. So if anybody asks you and says you're an animal, you bet I am, right? In a positive way. Nobody's laughing. Okay. So this is the chariot, as we said above. The sa'oira, now what does we feed it? We feed it barley. And I'm telling you, this is very dense, right? chariot, animal, barley. Now take a look at the word barley, sa'ira. You can break it up into two words, shear, a measure of hay, a measure of 5. And this I'll explain on the outside, as is explained in a later mimer that we may or may not learn in this series. 5. What's magic about 5? Well, there are 5 levels of the neshama, but that's just that's an expression of 5. Why 5? There are 5 on each side of the 10 commandments. 5 and 5, right? What's magic about 5? So a mashal that I'll use is a mashal that's brought in Chassidus. You take a look here. Here's my arm. See my arm? Everybody sees my arm? My arm's connected to my shoulder, and I have muscle here, and I can move it, and I'm moving my arm, and I'm moving it, and I have a lot of what I would call blunt power in this arm, kenohar. But the arm, as you move down the arm, evolves into 5 fingers. So the blunt power becomes now very more sensitive, more capable of piano playing, of holding a pen and writing, of more refined acts. So 5, we're going to call them, and he's going to call them, the 5 Gevoras. Because Gevora, remember, Chesed is continuous flow. Gevora is compartmentalization, division. You compartmentalize. The simple way of compartmentalizing is judgment. Gevora is judgment. What is judgment? You compartmentalize. One person is Zakai, he's meritorious in the din, and there's another who's Chayav in the din. You got 2 compartments. So what I've done here, these 5 Gevoras, I've taken the general flow of energy and divided it into compartments, and these compartments enable a more refined reality. Another metaphor that's brought about 5, and we'll just leave it with 2. There are He Motzois Hapeh, 5 articulative qualities of the mouth. So very similarly, we'll take another mashal. In my stomach here, I have breath coming up the windpipe. Very nice. Without it, I can't live, but I certainly can't talk. Every utterance that comes out of my mouth is an articulation and a division of that breath. And there are 5 articulative modalities and capabilities of the mouth. The throat contributes, the lips, the pe, the teeth, the tongue, the t, and the palate. 5 articulative. So again, it's the nature of taking something raw or something broad and refining it. So this whole metaphor of refining is also eating. And that's what we're going to talk about. Feeding the animal food that refines it. Where am I here? Okay, so all right, that's the barley, the food, which was shir hay. Let me just ask: is everybody getting this? Yes or no? Somebody tell me if you are or not. See a lot of watching people here. Beautiful. Opportunity for any question, because I'll move on. I think it's fairly simple. The all-encompassing energies of God are manifest how? Through 10 Sefiros, 10 divisional channels. And divisional channels are a function of Gevora. So Chesed Sheba Gevora. There's your first. Chesed Sheba Chesed is the first Sefira, and then Gevora Sheba Chesed, right? Which I use the articulative power, where I used at the beginning of this year. Instead of feeding all the candy to the kid, you hold it back so the kid is happy, but he's not losing his teeth and going to the dentist. So that's the combination Gevura Shebechesed. So, what does that mean? Let's talk about it as we go further. Okay, I have some yeses to the question. Someone's understanding it. Someone understands it abyssal, and someone says no problem here. It's fine. Okay. So nobody says no. So I'm moving on. Any questions, discussion? We have our WhatsApp Chassidus at K. You can always answer in there. So let's go further. So we have these archetypal structures of the animal, we have the chariot, and we have now the food. Siur He. And he says, Siur He is Shir He, which I just explained, dividing a blunt, all-encompassing energy into creative channels. And that's called V'hainu Meberurim Shilamata. That's called rectifying from below. In other words, the fingers are at the far extreme of this flow, and they provide the rectifying capabilities where the all-encompassing flow now can express its talents, right? It's refinement, and that's called birurim shilamata, refinements or rectifications from below. And these rectifications from below are memorialized. I'll just put this up for a second. Arousals from below. Here's our kohen, down here below, waving the Omer, rectifying it, bringing up to higher and higher levels, raising up the animal to the various levels of the Merkava. Okay. I think that's the most dense part. Let's see. Okay. As it says, we have a being another breath in the Siddur. Yetzer Meshoratzim, he creates those who serve him. And they're two, and it's brought in, and then it also says Yetzer Meshoratz Sov. And it's two different kinds of servants. And this is not Chassidus, this is learned in the oral Torah. Sheyesh Malachim Shehem Batelim B'chol Yom. There are angels, they float up. See, the angels are the construct of energies that take our tefillas and lift them up from our physical lips into the ethereal realms and up to Hashem himself. They lift them up. And some of these angels, as they get on their path and journey up and up and up, they're so consumed with the merging into the oneness that they burn up. They're called seraphim. They burn up. And there are those kind of angels that are batelim b'chol yoyim, which are nullified every day. Nivloilim b'nechlalalim. They are swallowed up literally, and they're included b'bechinis behema rabba, in the behema rabba, which is that level of animal way at the top of the heap. And again, for those who came, an animal unifies this cow. He's a herd animal. He can be domesticated. He can do what the man wants. And at the man being the animal soul, as he said above, that the nefesh elokis is called Adam. And at the same time, he has the power to lift the godly soul to a higher level. Just like the chariot lifts the man to a higher level. Okay? So these are the angels. They bring our prayers up. They bring it up to levels where they themselves are so consumed that they're swallowed up into this high level, which we call the behema rabba, the big animal, which is usually in the world, in Kabbalah, either in Yetzirah or Bria, for those who want to know where you can find it. Just like, and here he uses now the metaphor of eating, just like when you feed the animal barley, what happens? The barley gets nivla b'behema, gets swallowed up, digested in the animal, down here below, and it returns, and each and every day, the animal uses that energy to do productive things. That's the idea of, in a positive way, of getting swallowed up, utilizing it, and he needs more, so the angel is recreated, and the behema has to be fed again. And this is all the avodah, the service from below to above of the kohen, raising up the animal. And this is, he's not saying how we do this in a personal way, a psychological, individual way, but he's giving us the construct of what this avodah is all about as it's modeled in the temple, right? And we know from and this is very common to say, Asuli mikdash, make from your temple, v'shechanti b'sei chom, and my divine providence will dwell not within it, but within each and every one of you. So we're a temple, and we're looking now at the temple model, and the temple model in this particular time, which is Sefiros Omer, which is counting each sphera as it inter-includes each other, and making them sapir, making them shine, and we're looking at it through the model of what the Kohen did in the Beis HaMikdash. And this is what it means, the Kohen waved it. And the Kohen, by the way, he's a level. Aaron ish chesed, the Kohen Gadol, chesed elyon. Ha'ol es bechinis behemen. What's his job? The job of the Kohen is to elevate the animal and take that animal and then elevate it up to the highest level, which is the Behema Rabbah, as we explained above. And he does that al yidei Omer, through the Omer, which is Sa'ira, which is barley, which is Shir Hay. In other words, we got to translate this into our own states of being. We take energy that's that's infused in us through eating, and what do we do with it? We could do nothing with it. We could sleep all day and be that kind of an animal, or we could be an animal in the sense of lifting it. We could use it productively, and using it up productively, like the animal. Because there's another expression from the Talmud, "Roiv tevua b'koyach shor." You get a lot of grain from the power of the ox. So that's productivity, and the grain that we're looking for is not just the physical grain, but we talked about is the spiritual grain, the food. What really feeds us, of course, is godliness, is the energetic from the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what we are meant to eat. That's what's embodied, by the way, in everything that we do eat. It's all godliness and ruchnius that empowers the physical down here below, and we eat the physical. And when we eat the physical, what happens? Just the reverse. We take the physical, the matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, the matter that we eat, and we release energy from it. We convert matter into energy. So that's what we do. We're a matter to energy conversion machine. The goal being, of course, to convert it into the highest level of energy, which is elikus, godliness. And we do that by digesting in the animal part of us, the barley, which is the fruit, the food of an animal. And we raise that. This is now the kohen within us. This is our avodah, right? Every day we do an avodah. We call it davening. And the davening was instead of the korban tamid. Every day we offered up. Who offered up? The kohanim offered up. So this is the kohen function within each and every one of us, the kahuna, the priest that we are. We're meant to be a nation of priests, not only in the sense of a priesthood that educates the masses, but also a priesthood in performing the elevation of ourselves and all the masses to the experience of the source of it all, God Himself, which we're calling in the Chumash about of the Omer, we lift the Lifnei Havaya, right? That was the pasuk. He raises the Omer Lifnei Havaya. In front of Havaya means Lamayla me Havaya. What could that possibly mean? Havaya is the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So let's just briefly, we've said this, but we'll say now, Yud Kei Vav Kei are the letters of creation. Yud, Chochma, inspiration of the creation. Hey, Bina, the blueprint for creation. Vav, the actual drawing down of that blueprint into actuality, reality, or what we call lower reality, and ultimately physical reality, and the Hey, where that physical reality spreads out into the vastness of the physical universe, right? So Yud Kei Vav Kei is only the name of God as He creates. There's an essence, just like an essence of each one of us, which is beyond the things we do. So there's an essence of God. And that essence of God, which is behind the Yud Kei Vav Kei, is Lifnei Havaya. higher than the Shem Havaya. So the animal, again, the animal lifts the man on the horse or on the chariot to a place he could not get to on his own. On his own, we're a nefesh elokis. But a nefesh elokis is a thing. It's called a nefesh. It's a chelek elokah. It's a part of God. But first of all, elokah, Elokim is the name of God that has to do with degradation and creation. It's not even the Shem Havaya. And we're a chelek of that. It's great, great. But there's higher level, because this is an infinite regression. There's no end to how high you can go. And higher than that, higher than Elokim, higher than Havaya, is what the animal can bring us to, like the horse can bring a man to a place higher than he could get to on his own. And a chariot, of course, takes the man to places and with power that he could never have on his own. So we've touched now the animal, the Omer, and we've touched waving the Omer, rectifying, lifting up, utilizing, releasing the power that's within it. And we've touched up the Klayin. Why it's the Klayin does it? Because that's the instrument that we have within ourselves of elevating, like the Korban, Lashon Kiruv, to bring ourselves close to God. And we also have now explicated Mimocharos Shabbos, because Mocharos means higher than Hashem. Mimocharos Shabbos, and right, that's what the pasuk says. It should have said, you would think, Mimocharos Yom Tov, because we start counting Sefiros Omer on the day after Pesach. Why does it say Mimocharos Shabbos? Because the level that we're talking about here is Shehulamaylam Yechinas Shabbos. It's higher than Shabbos. Now, before I stop, I want to show you something. I've put in the Chassidus at K WhatsApp a whole week's worth of pictures, one of which I'll show you and explain. This is something that I did this a few years ago, and some of you here, if I can see here, may have been in my class a few years ago. But I want to show this to you, if I can. You'll see a nice shot of my air conditioner, see? Need some tape. Let's try to get this here. Oh, okay, here we go. Black and white. Oh, I need a better studio. Help me out here. Okay, let me lift it up. Okay. I hope you can do it. I'm doing this with my arms, and you can see a little shakiness. Okay. This is Yesod Shebetiferes. This is Yesod within Tiferes. And what I've done here is let's take Tiferes. I've taken words that are found in Chassidus to describe Tiferes: beauty, harmony, balance, integration, compassion, mercy, Rahmanas. And then these are words which are used to describe Yesod: foundational, procreational, creative, transmitting, grounded, generative, communicate, channel. Remember, Yesod is the channel into Malchus. It channels all the other midos into the womb of Malchus. Now what I've done here is, okay, I'm looking at this. I'm living, starting tonight, with Yesod Shebetiferes. What do I do with it? So I take something from Yesod and merge it with something in Tiferes, and I decided that you can do any combinations you want. The one that's meaningful to me is generating harmony. So for the next, the next night, the 22nd, the 21st night, tomorrow night, I hope that in my next day, in 24 hours, I'm going to at least a few times meditate on generating harmony and trying to generate harmony in whatever I'm doing. So assuming that that's clear, yeah? Is that understood? No problem, okay. So I've given you, if you want to do this, I find it very effective. I don't know, good, I see people like it. So I've given you all of them for the next week. And you can do the same thing. Look at it and try to find a good match of one on the inner circle and the outer circle, which is now what you're doing. You're reintegrating the midos for that day, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Integrating. Sapir. making our midos shine. And the formula for that is each of the Yesod Sheva Sefiros, etc., etc. This helps, I think, helps me, and I hope it helps you, to bring it down to earth so that you can make it meaningful and ponder that particular pair that you choose in a way that you can live with it for the day. Said, would you please take a picture and put it into the chat? I've done that. In the Chassidus at K WhatsApp, you will find PDFs, pictures of each of the days of the sphere for the next week, and you can then print it or not print it, or just decide in your mind how to use it. Now, someone said, would you please explain that again more slowly? Now, I don't know when that came up. It's Anne, you asked for that. Can you indicate? Okay, good. And Elisa, okay, all good. Okay, that must have been something from before. Any other issues out there? Okay, guys, looks like people got it. And the main thing is to get it lamaase. Gadol Torah shemevid l'day ma'ase. Great is Torah that brings to deed. So have a good day of deeds tomorrow until we meet again. Good night.